Valentine's Day is coming up. You can't get out to the shops to buy any Valentine's decor, so how about making your own bunting using some old birthday cards? As you can see, my old birthday cards are mainly pink, and I've gone through them, ripping off the part that's got the messages, so I've got the front sections to play around with and cut out my heart shapes for my bunting. So having got your cards together, you then need to work out how many of your heart-shaped motifs you'd need to make. Originally I was going to write Hello Spring, and then I changed my mind to Happy Valentine's Day, and then I go through and count up how many letters I've got, how many spaces I need to leave, and in the end I decide to add in a blank heart at the end of this particular phrase. I'm going to use a craft hole punch to stamp out my heart shapes. If you're interested in buying something similar, I'll leave a link to it in the show notes underneath the video. You could of course draw your hearts freehand, or perhaps even use a pastry cutter and draw around that if you happen to have a heart-shaped one. I always use my cutter the wrong way up so I can see through the little viewing hole what I'm actually going to be stamping out. And you can see here I've decided, because I wanted to get some of the heart-shaped motifs into my heart, that I've had to slice off the bottom edge of the card so that the heart cutter cuts out what I actually want it to cut, rather than just being random. As you can see from this birthday card, I've only been able to cut out one heart. Of course, you may be able to get out more hearts than I did, but it just depends on how big your card is and whether you want your cards to be stamped randomly or whether you want to be more considered about what you're actually cutting out. And then you continue the process until you've got the number of hearts you need, remembering to add in an extra heart if you're adding in words to give you a space. And as I said before, I decided to cut out 2 extra hearts, one for either end of my bunting. I've decided to stitch my hearts in place and string them up by threading yarn through them. So I'm going to take a really tiny craft punch here, a single hole punch which is just a few millimetres wide, and stamp in holes on both sides of the hearts. This way, by stitching the hearts together, it'll mean they'll stay in place and you won't get that situation where if you just string them together that they all fall down to the lowest point. If you're interested in this type of craft single hole punch, I'll leave details to a similar one in the show notes underneath my video. Once you've prepared all your hearts, I would then lay them out on the surface in front of you. Just decide which order you want them in, whether you want them to be all pales going darker, or whether you want to mix the more vibrant colours with the paler colours. So it's just a good idea to see how they look when you spread them out in front of you, and then stack them to one side in the order you want, and then that'll make it easier when you come to string them up together. I'm going to use this 100% cotton crochet yarn to string my bunting together, just because I had it to hand. So you could use normal household string, a really strong cotton thread. Just make sure it's not going to snap, or wool, so the choice is up to you. I'm going to thread my yarn onto a large-eyed needle, and I was just checking to make sure that my needle was going to fit through the little punch hole. You could just thread the thread through on its own, but I think it's going to be a little bit tricky doing that, so if you do have a needle, I would advise using it. And I'm going to start off making a loop at the end, and this is how I'm going to hang my bunting up, and I'll do the same at the other end when I've finished. I start by taking my needle to the underside of the heart, bring it out at the top, and then take the thread all the way to the other hole at the other side of the heart, and from the underneath go up through the hole and then back up again. So you end up with 2 little stitches on each side of the heart, and that's what locks it in place and stops it sliding down. When you come to add on or stitch on your second heart, just think about the spacing that you want to leave between each of the hearts. So just keep this as regular as possible. So do the same thing, working from underneath and do a stitch, and then go through to the hole at the other side of the heart and do a stitch. And all the time I worked from going underneath the heart up to the top. As with all crafting projects, you need to get into the zone with the technique. This isn't difficult to do, just a matter of making sure your thread isn't too long, it doesn't get knotty, but all the time working in the same methodical way, taking your stitch from the underside out through the top, across behind your heart, and then from the underside to the top, and do that again just to hold it in place. Because I was working with about 20 hearts to spell out Happy Valentine's Day, I found it difficult working with a piece of thread that was going to be that long, and what I ended up doing was cutting my thread down to a more manageable length and then joining it in several places. And I did this by making sure my knot was at the back of the heart and you can't see it at all from the front. Once I'd finished stringing my hearts together, I then printed out some letters spelling Happy Valentine's Day using my Cricut machine and peeled them off and put them on as if they were transfers, and then highlighted round them with some gold pen just to add a bit of extra definition. So if you watch onto the video, into the video, I'll show you exactly how I did this. Having printed my letters out using my Cricut machine, you see me here weeding out the excess vinyl, so I'll be left with the letters on the blue backing paper. Normally when you do vinyl lettering, you then add transfer paper and you transfer that across to the piece that you're working on, but I'm going to use these as if they were stickers and just place them by hand. So here I am all ready to go, and just peeling the letters off and putting them onto the card. I did find this quite tricky, if I'm honest. The font that I used has some very narrow pieces on the text, so it may be easier to do this using transfer paper, but I was slightly worried that the stickiness of the transfer tape would lift off the top surface of my birthday cards, but perhaps using letter stickers would be an easier way to do this. And just a quick reminder, if you have spelt out a message with 2 or 3 different words in and you decided to leave spaces, make sure you leave the spaces. So here I've done the Happy Valentine's, I've left a heart with no letters on it, and then I finish off with my D-A-Y and leaving one heart blank at the end, which matches the blank heart right at the beginning of my bunting. To add a bit of definition to my bunting, I'm going to outline my letters using a metallic gold pen. So I'm just going around the edges really carefully, and because my lettering was, again, had quite thick sections to it and quite thin, I didn't go around every individual piece. I just gave the illusion of adding a bit of depth of 3D appearance to the letters, just so they showed up a little bit more. I really enjoyed adding this bit of detail to my bunting, and it really does make it stand out. And actually what you probably notice most is the gold lettering rather than the white vinyl text itself. It almost looks like I've written these letters out freehand. I decided to string my bunting out on my new peg rail, which leads into my kitchen. It's a white peg rail, and I've decorated it with curly branches of twisted willow and some fairy lights, and I found some heart-shaped baubles which I bought in the sales after Christmas 3 or 4 years ago, so I'm really pleased to be able to put these to good use. That's all from me for now, and I will see you in the next video.